Hi, this is Kylie. Welcome to my studio. Just adding a quick bit in at the start of this video, just to let you know about the problems I was having getting this uploaded. I thought it was a technical issue with the film itself, so I actually recorded a voice over and took all the sound out and actually cut it down as much as I possibly could, so you just see the main bits of the video. It turns out though it was actually a problem with my internet, which as of today should be fixed, so I am hoping to upload this overnight tonight and it should be up for Tuesday. So what you'll hear next is the actual bit that I had, the voiceover that I'd recorded. Hi, this is Kylie. Welcome to my studio. I'm sorry this video is coming to you a bit late. I've had problems getting it uploaded, so I'm now trying to make it as short as possible and doing a voiceover instead of chatting at the time. So here I'm just showing you the two pieces from weeks 1 and 2 and just showing you the back because I did do a little bit more work on that second page there. I also just kind of did some doodling to take the two over. I added a bit more colour, mainly with I think colour pencils and some pen, just to give some emphasis really to the bird there and the other little creatures that I'd found. So let's get on with this week. So if you watched the previous video, you would have heard me say that I'd kind of got myself into a little bit of a corner because of the fact that I'd done the doodling and hadn't thought about what page would follow next, because I don't want any of the doodles to actually be covered over. So this piece that I'm looking at will now need to fit onto the front here rather than onto the back, and that's absolutely fine because in terms of joining these pieces on, I'm thinking of doing it in different ways. But because I doodled on the back, it just limited how I could now join these up. So just looking at this particular piece there, I'm just showing that I can still pull out the little bit that I tucked into the pocket there. So I'm thinking this piece will work. And what I'll do is I will take a pencil and mark it on here. Basically, I want to position it so that along the bottom line is fairly straight and kind of consistent, so that when it comes to putting it actually on to whatever I attach it to, and more about that soon, then I want to have at least one part of it running fairly straight. You'll see I've just marked it in with the pencil. I also didn't want to cover up the kind of sun that was there. So now that I've marked that, I know when it comes to gluing roughly where I want it to go. So you'll see me pointing there to part of my underpaper. Now I've actually got a piece of baking paper over the underpaper, and I'd looked at that a few times and I'd thought I actually really like the way that that looks. So what I'm going to do now is tear out a bit of that underpaper, and I also tear out a bit of the baking paper. It's funny how sometimes just seeing something like that lying on the work table or on a scrap piece of paper just provides a bit of inspiration. So I've got that out and I'm really liking just the black on the, it's really just a piece of newsprint, it's flip chart paper. Really loving that mark, but also loving the gold. So now I'm just taking my page for this week and just looking at how I might incorporate it. So I'd spent a few minutes looking back and forward, and here I am. I'm just going to tear down here just quite roughly, doesn't matter that it's uneven. You'll see me pointing there to a tiny bit of blue. It's almost a kind of duck egg blue because I really, really liked that little bit of colour. So now just looking at how or which bit I will attach, and I want to make sure that I get the bit onto the page that I really want. So again, I'm going to take my pencil and just mark it on the back. So I put my piece face down and just draw around my page just so I know where I want to glue it. Obviously I'd looked back and forward from back to front a couple of times to make sure that it was right. Discovered that there was some measurements on there, so I just write them down on a separate piece of paper. I'm not sure what they were for, but yeah. Because the flip chart paper is very thin, I don't want to get it wet with a wet glue, so I'm just going to use a Pritt Stick glue stick. So all I do is I mark it, or I glue it all within, roughly within that kind of area that I know is the piece that I'm going to use, and then I'll get the page itself and put glue onto it as well, so that both sides have glue on and hopefully it will stick better. And then once that's done, I will just simply put the two pieces together, roughly following the guidelines that I'd drawn with the pencil. I'm then going to take a bone folder and just smooth it out on both sides. I try to do this quite carefully on this side in particular because I don't want to rip the paper. I can be a bit heavy-handed sometimes. And it's sticking to my sheet underneath, so I'll swap that out in a second for a piece of deli paper. Now the two pieces are glued together, I'm just going to try and tear it down the same line as my page itself. So it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of overhang, but basically trying to get it the same. So while I like this piece, I did feel that I wanted to try and incorporate more of the gold and probably even that little bit of blue. So I start to take another scrap out of the piece that I had originally pulled out. And you see I'm just lining that up there. Now I didn't like the fact that that bottom blob of glue was then covering that kind of circular element, so I will go on to tear that bit out. I don't mind it covering ever so slightly, but I certainly didn't want to lose that particular kind of focal point. So I liked this and liked that I was able to just retain that little bit of the duck egg blue colour, and all I'm going to do now is to glue it down. I think I pull it down just ever so slightly, but not much. So just gluing that little scrap of paper and then I'll attach them. So just going to put the two pieces together now, and you'll see I bring it down just a little bit from the very top. I just like the fact that there was a kind of uneven edge on top of the base, which was slightly uneven, and again just using a bone folder to make sure that it's well secured. And then again I will just tear off the little bits of overhang. I then tore out a bit of my baking paper undersheet, and I liked this one because it just had a tiny little bit of paint on it, so that's why I kind of went with that one. But this changes again, you know, it's one of these things that it's really just kind of working kind of intuitively and just seeing, thinking I'm going one direction and then I change it ever so slightly. So I'm just trying to tear this down into a rough shape. I don't necessarily want it to mirror exactly the shape of the kind of substrate page. There was some marks on it that I quite liked, and it's just a bit of deli paper there. So I'm looking at how that's fitting along the top there. Decide that I want a kind of slightly straighter line along here, but again just tearing it so that it's not scissor straight, if that makes sense. It's still fairly straight, but it still has a kind of slightly more organic style tear to it. And I look at this and I think, yeah, I'm liking that. It replicated kind of what I'd seen underneath. But then I looked at this bit that I'd torn, and decided I think I actually like that piece more, and you'll see I go back and forward a couple of times trying to decide, and I decide on that piece. So I used Stays On ink and my alphabet stamps, and I stamped my word of the week, Fortitude. Now when I stamped it on the baking paper, it actually came out quite light, and when I was looking at it on here I thought, oh, do I like that? But actually I did like it. I liked the fact that I almost had to move it about to be able to read the word. You'll see two little pencil lines there. That was just where I'd marked it so that I knew that I stayed within those lines. So I keep looking, look at where I'm going to position it, and yeah, I decide that I'm going to go with it. So I decided that I would use the art glitter glue to try and glue it into place. But what I also decided was that I was only going to glue down the left hand side of it, and that in fact I would leave it in such a way that it could be pulled forward. Why? I don't know why. I just decided that's what I wanted to do. So I put a good amount of the art glitter glue down, just push that into place. You see the glue moving underneath, but it's fine because it will dry clear. I just try and smooth it gently, trying not to let it go onto the actual word itself, repositioning it ever so slightly until I got it exactly where I wanted it. As I was waiting for it to dry, I saw this other bit of paper and actually thought it might be quite good just to attach a little bit to where it will actually open. So it was just a tiny bit. So again, I decided just to use the art glitter glue, although I said I didn't want to use any wet glue with that particular paper. For a bit this size, it seemed fine just to do that. So I'll now just stick this in place. So it's going to overhang the baking paper just by a fraction, not very much at all. And I just put in that other little bit just so that it doesn't stick to the base card. And then what I'll do, once it's a little bit drier, I'll tear down that edge. Now I was seeing a little bit of a white edge from that paper, and I just decided that I would use the Stays On ink and just go around it just to ever so slightly darken up, grey up really, the piece of the flip chart paper. And here I am just taking off that little bit of overhang now that that's dried a bit and is holding in place. And here we have the week 3 section of my spiral scroll. I like that I can't see the word very clearly, but I also like the fact that it can move, and that piece of underpaper I just loved. So I'm just looking here at joining the piece on now. And all I'm going to do here is just line it up, just spend a minute or two lining it up, and then I will use the Beacon 3-in-1 glue to glue it in place. So I can see the pencil marks I made earlier, so basically I'm just checking again that if I glue it there I can still get the little enclosure thing out, and I will just use the glue now. I'll just put this in place down that line. Then it's simply a case of attaching the piece and just making sure that it holds firmly, making sure that I don't go over my sun there, and I'll then just give it a few minutes just to make sure that it's dry before I kind of flip it over and look at the other side. So just looking at the other side, just wipe a tiny bit of glue that had seeped through, but I can see that I've managed to preserve the doodle that I'd done. So I'm not going to doodle on the week 3 card on the back until I know how I'm going to attach week 4 because I don't want to get myself into that corner again where it's difficult. Just noticed there, quite by chance, that the line from last week, which I had thought was a kind of landscape, that when that piece of baking paper is over, it kind of continues on the kind of hill. I did darken down off camera last week the background to Endeavour. I just felt it was a bit too bright. So thanks ever so much for watching. Do take care. Bye for now.